Hello and welcome to PCI Webinars. Today's webinar, free genealogy resources everyone can use, with Maggie Rose. Maggie is a librarian at the Twinsburg Public Library in Northern Ohio. She coordinates the library book displays and is responsible for the audiobook and board games collections. Maggie also teaches computer classes and sits on the Reference and Information Services Division and Adult Services Division action consoles for the Ohio Library Council. Maggie started library work in 5th grade as a shelver and volunteer in her school library. As a teen, she started shelving in her local public library and has had many library positions since. Maggie graduated summa cum laude from the University of Akron with a BA in English and a minor in classical studies. She received her MLIS from Kent State and has been working as a librarian for more than 6 years. Maggie loves gardening, camping, and her boisterous family, which consists of a spouse, a boy, a girl, a dog, 5 cats, and 9 chickens. Coming to you now from Northeast Ohio, it's Maggie Rose.
Hi, everybody. I hope you all can hear me okay. Thank you for signing up to come to this webinar. I'm really excited. I have a whole lot of information to share with you in a very brief amount of time. So if you have questions, I want you to please type them in the chat as you think of them. That way I can pause and make sure to address your question in relation to the topic that we are discussing. Also, you are going to want all of those downloads on the lower left-hand corner. They're great handouts. There's more information there than I've been able to put in this presentation for you. I'm really excited to share this topic with you. I enjoy genealogy a lot, and my genealogical mentor is Deborah Kitco, and she is from the Wayne County Public Library System in Wayne County, Ohio. And so I've shared a lot of her resources with her permission with you, and so you'll see her name on those download files for you. So without further ado, let's get started with the information. And if I'm speaking too fast, totally put it in the chat to ask me to slow down, because I do have a lot going here and I want to make sure that we get to everything. So when it comes to just starting out with genealogy, and even if you've been tooling around online for a little while, there are some things that you really want to know. Some suggestions for successful searching, best practices in genealogy, kind of how other genealogists do this kind of thing. And one of those is staying on track. I tend to be really bad with little scraps of paper, and I will write something that is important to me at the time on this little scrap of paper, and then I move on and I go down a rabbit hole of information searching. I'm researching a certain ancestor, and then I go off on a tangent, and I'm really bad about this. So staying on track is really important, and I need to take my own advice. So what you want to do is you want to develop a research log. And a research log is where you can record which ancestor you're researching. You can sources that you consulted for that one ancestor. You can make a note of questions regarding researching that ancestor. Instead of going down that rabbit hole, going off on a tangent, just write your question down so that when you are finished answering your first question, then you can move on. And then also you're going to be making notes of transcriptions. If you are looking at an original resource and you can't print it out, you're going to just copy down the information as a transcription. So I definitely want to give you lots of resources today. You're going to want to download the PowerPoint as well for all the links in here. So as far as free resources, I've kind of split them up into free print resources and free digital resources, and there's going to be some overlap here. As far as free print resources go, I repurpose scrap paper with a 3-hole punch, and I build a binder. I like the binder, the loose leaf style, because I can add and take out notes and papers. When I'm printing out copies of resources, I can just 3-hole punch them and pop them right in the binder according to which section or which ancestor I'm researching. You can also use notebooks, journals, composition books, that kind of stuff. It's a no-brainer because this is going to be your personal research notebook. If you are of the digital persuasion and you want to take notes on your computer or your tablet, but you're going to need a word processing program for that. If you don't already have Microsoft Office, let me recommend WPS Office. Are these pages in the downloads? That is a good question, Natalie. This PowerPoint is the PowerPoint in the downloads. We're going to get to that. Yes. Thank you, Angela. 3. All right. So yes, you can download the entire PowerPoint from the downloads. I think it's just called Beginning Genealogy. All right, great question. So if you don't have word processing software while you're doing your research and you're using electronic methods, you can get a free word processing software. It's WPS Office, and there's almost zero transition between Microsoft Office and this word processing software. I use the whole suite on my home computer. I really love it. I can't recommend it enough, and there's the link to the free download right there. Also, the fillable research logs. I have a link here to the familysearch.org. It's a bit.ly link, and it links you to this research form that's provided by Family Search. I'm going to talk a little bit more about them later on. And what it does is it organizes your research for that day. It's got a goals section. You can list your ancestor, the questions you have regarding that ancestor. You can take note of the resources that you looked for that ancestor on that day and make notes of any questions you have. The research logs, you can download them, you can print them, you can fill them out right online. Excellent resource to help keep you on track and organized in your research. So when you are recording your ancestors, when you are filling out your research logs and recording your ancestors, there are some kind of weird things in genealogy research that you should be aware of, especially if you're looking through someone else's research, in case you're crossing family lines and someone else has already done all this research for you. Make a note that names are always recorded in their given order with the first, middle, and last name. In libraries, we like to go by the last name first, with all of our authors, but in genealogy research, it's always first, middle, and last name. And women are always recorded with their maiden names, and nicknames are going to be in parentheses. So you may have had an Aunt Kate March, and you may not have been aware that her first name was actually Isabella, but it's going to be on her legal documents, at least most of them. So be aware of that in your research. Also, the dates. The dates are really important. This is one of the things that is the biggest hurdle to beginning genealogists. In genealogy, dates are recorded in the day, month, year format. The 20th of May, 2016. The 5th of August, 2013. And that way there's absolutely zero confusion of which month, which day, and which year. You got to spell them all the way out every time, because it's easy to get confused. If you write down the date 7/6/77, are you talking about July 6, 1977 or June 7th, 1877? So when you're using your genealogy brain, you want to make sure that it's always day, month, year, and you spell it out completely. All right, so some quick resources for recording your ancestors. I have a link here to the National Archives, Charts and Forms. The National Archives is a really great resource for genealogy work. They'll get you started on the census, they'll get you started with an ancestral chart and a family group sheet. The difference between the two is that an ancestral chart, you start with one person and then you go backwards in time, their parents and their parents' parents and their parents' parents' parents, and so on and so forth. A family group sheet starts out with one person and their parents and their aunts and uncles and their siblings, and so it's more inclusive, more of the entire group. The next link here under free print resources is the you'll see it there listed as My MCPL. That is from the Midwest Genealogy Center from the Mid-Continent Public Library in Missouri. I love their website. They have fillable PDFs. You can print them down, or you can print them out and write them in by hand. But if you're tech savvy, I have this also listed on the free digital resources. Okay, so fillable download PDFs from mymcpl.org, the Midwest Genealogy Center, Mid-Continent Public Library in Missouri. They have a wonderful selection of fillable PDF forms. You can download them and print them and fill them out by hand, or you can download them and then type in your information and save it to your drives. Another thing I want to mention as far as recording your ancestors, there's a number of free software programs out there for doing genealogy, and I'm going to talk about those in a little greater detail further on, but right now I do want to mention this Gramps to you. Gramps, the GrampsProject.org is a free open source genealogy program, and it's open source kind of like that WPS software, so it's not proprietary. There's no commercials, there's no, hey, give us money kind of thing. And it's a database that you download to your computer that you create yourself. And you build this database of your ancestors, and then you can print out these beautiful charts and beautiful trees. And then this is where, if you're digital savvy, if you need to upload those PDF files, those fillable PDF files, you can either transfer the information by hand to the Gramps software, or just upload the file and have it saved in the Gramps software as part of your genealogy research. And so, continuing with our best practices for successful searching, you want to definitely make sure that you're citing your sources. It's important to cite your sources because you're going to want to locate them again for additional information later on. And they could possibly lead to other useful sources. If you have a list of everything that you've already looked at, it might trigger something in your memory to go look somewhere else. You never know. And then also verifying correct information. If you have one source that says your ancestor's name was spelled E-L-E-A-N-A, and then you have another source where your ancestor's name is spelled E-L-E-N-A, you want to try to figure out which is the right way. So you're going to make a note in your research log that this source said this and this source said that, and then you're going to verify that that is exactly what the source said, and this will help you prevent any discrepancies in your research. Also, if you're looking ahead to the future and you think you might publish your research, or you think you might add your family history to a local history collection, you want to make sure that you have all of your sources cited so that you are doing your due diligence in being a good researcher. When you are citing your sources, the very, very best resource for citing your sources is Evidence Explained by Elizabeth Schoen Mills. This was published in 2015. It is available from public libraries. If you work at a library that has strong genealogy researchers, you definitely want to make sure that you have a reference copy of this at the very least, preferably a circulating copy. Or, if you work in a library system where you can borrow books from other libraries, you can definitely access this from public libraries. Elizabeth Schoen Mills she literally wrote the book on how to cite for genealogical sources. And the closest style that genealogists use is the humanities style from the Chicago Manual of Style. And Mills says that you just simply place your full citations and footnotes, and then you add comments. It's not as rigorous, it's not as structured as, say, APA or some other forms of citation, but you do want to make clear what source you were looking at. And because this book it's about 3 inches thick, it's kind of daunting, and no one really likes having to hunt to find how to cite something. I have included this wonderful source documentation cheat sheet. Say that 3 times fast. So this comes from the Family Tree magazine. Family Tree publishes a print publication. I believe it's monthly or bi-monthly. And they also have a wonderful website. And this is accessible for free, but you do have to give them your email, and then they send you a link to it. I haven't got a whole lot of spam from them. I've downloaded quite a few things from them. But in case you don't want to go that route, I've included it here. You can download the PowerPoint presentation and print this out. And this is your most frequently cited sources. We've got Bible records, we've got census records, church records, passenger lists, vital records, land deeds. This is the most frequently cited items and how to cite them. So this is a wonderful resource, very handy. I love it very much, and I'm excited to share it with you. Some other resources for citing your citing your sources is the Family Tree Fact Book that's published by the same company that does the Family Tree magazine. This is also widely available in public libraries. If you have trouble getting a hold of Evidence Explained by Elizabeth Shown Mills, I would definitely go for the Family Tree Fact Book. It's very accessible, it's very easy to read, easy to use, and it's not intimidating at all. It's only about 1 inch thick, and it's got a nice soft cover and bright colors. I definitely recommend this book because it also has more information about how to use certain resources. As far as free digital resources for keeping track of your citations, there's FamilySearch.org. I'm going to talk a little bit more about them. And also the Grant Project, there's a way to keep track of your resources in that downloadable database there. But the FamilySearch.org, to use their service, you do have to create an account with an email, and you have to give them a little bit of your personal information. But what they do there is they'll take your information and they'll try to connect you to your ancestors as part of their project. And I'll talk a little bit more about them later on. And then I have a link here from the Family Search Wiki. You can access this without having an account, and this article here talks about the evidence style of citing your sources in genealogy research, and it goes through the basics, and it has a lot of quotes from Evidence Explained, citing history sources from artifacts to cyberspace. A lot of quotes, a lot of the information in that article is taken directly from the book. So if you have trouble getting a hold of something in print, you can always check this link here for more information on how to cite your sources. All right. So this is the FamilySearch.org. This is what your source box looks like. This is where you can save links to your sources. If you choose to use the Family Search database, whenever you look at a source, there's a little button that says add to my source box, and you just click it, and then you see that these are the things that you've looked at during your research. And then you can also attach these sources to your ancestors that you're researching, all within the database. You do have to create a free account. It does require an email, and then your information will be linked to the LDS databases and archives, because Family Search is a genealogical project from the Church of Latter-day Saints. All right, so the last thing we're going to talk about when it comes to genealogy basics is transcribing your sources. I mentioned very early on that transcribing your sources is something that you're going to be doing when you can't print out a copy off the internet or make a photocopy. A lot of times, especially if you're doing family Bible research, those are very delicate documents, so you want to make a word-for-word copy, and you want to copy errors exactly as they are. And then if you have to add clarification, you want to add it in brackets. And I have a very fun, very exciting example here for you. So this letter here on the right is a Civil War letter from it's from Sherman Lane, and he was a Twinsburg resident during the Civil War, and we happened to get a hold of all of his letters, and we were working on digitizing them. And I'm lucky enough to have a coworker who used to be an archivist, so she's done a lot of transcribing in her previous career. And so her note at the top is, it just couldn't do it. There was a large number of misspellings. She corrected them because if she didn't correct them, you could hardly still read it, even if she transcribed it. And so she's got the transcription here with the page break and carrots. And then if you want to see more of this, I've got the link to it down at the bottom there. After you download the PowerPoint presentation, that should take you straight to the page for this particular letter. If you don't have experience reading 19th century cursive handwriting that's been faded for nearly 200 years, then I do recommend the transcription tutorial. There's a link to it on the right here, and this is from the United Kingdom's National Archives page. Yes, the internet is wonderful because we can just hop across the pond and borrow their resources as well. What they have there, it's a program that will teach you, they call it paleography, which is reading and old handwriting from 1500 to 1800. And it'll give you great practice. You know, you're looking at it on the screen and then you type it and it'll tell you things of note. For example, a lot of times S's looks like F's and vice versa, and there were all these weird abbreviations. So definitely look into that if you've never experienced 18th century or 19th century handwriting before. I have a coworker who I wrote him a note in cursive, and I felt so bad because he had to ask for a translation. So be aware of that. Also, as far as a print resource for this, there's a book called Organizing and Preserving Your Heirloom Documents. Chapter 9 talks about reading old letters and that kind of thing. And that is widely available through public libraries. I see some people are typing. Can you all still hear me? What did I say the centuries were? Oh, yes. So Angela 3 wants to know when I was talking about the centuries of handwriting. In the UK National Archives tutorial, they go from the 16th century to the 19th century. And so when you are researching, a lot of times getting that 18th and 19th century handwriting down is a little tricky, but this tutorial can help you, as well as the information in the Chapter 9 of Organizing and Preserving Your Heirloom Documents. Angela, did I completely answer your question? Angela, yeah! All right, cool. And so I really like these resources. So, and I've got more to show you at the end. We're just full of resources here. Okay, so moving on, we're going to talk about census records. Right on the heels of talking about handwriting, we're going to flow right into census records. If anyone has ever seen an original census record from the 1800s, which is the 19th century, they are difficult to read. Lots of little spidery handwriting. They're usually faded and grayed out, and then you need a magnifying glass to see them. They're a whole lot of fun. So What are census records? So the United States began the first federal census in 1790, and every 10 years they do another one. I'm pretty sure we're all aware that there's a census coming up next year, and we're all very excited about it. I know my library is having job fairs and everything to hire enumerators. And the census recorded the ages and the names and the sex and the address, and then sometimes more information about that individual. Each decade, each census recorded different information. So be aware of that as you're looking through them. And they're all on a 72-year restriction to protect privacy. It might seem like an arbitrary number, 72 years, but I guess they figured that was an average lifespan. The most recent census that has been released was from 1940, and then the next census to be released will be in 2022, and that's going to be the 1950. So this is something to be excited about and something to watch out for, as our next census is coming. So I mentioned the word enumerators, and I did that because enumerators are real people, and we have a lot to be grateful for when we think about the people who recorded all of this extremely valuable and wonderful information that we can access in the U.S. federal censuses. But there are some caveats. There are some things to watch out for. Enumerators could have had a bad day. Enumerators could have had terrible handwriting. And then if they had terrible handwriting, then the transcribers who were interpreting those census records to input into digital databases may have trouble reading their handwriting. So sometimes you'll find that the enumerator wrote one thing, but the person who entered it into the database interpreted it as something else. You'll get alternate name spellings. Not every enumerator had all the time in the world to politely say, "And how do you spell your name?" A lot of times they'll just say, "Oh, this is Bob," instead of, "Is your name really Robert?" That kind of thing. Or the Elena example from earlier. The 1890 federal census was mostly lost in a fire. So if you can find your ancestor in the 1890s federal census, consider yourself very lucky. That year is notoriously difficult to research. When you are going through census records and you find your ancestor in one, you want to look kind of above and below where your ancestor is listed, because you might see a snapshot of the entire neighborhood. And if you see that snapshot of the neighborhood, sometimes you might get lucky and realize that, hey, my great aunt married the boy down the road. And that's a key, a stepping stone that is valuable to you, and one of the reasons why you always want to view the original census record if available, because a lot of times they have more information contained in the original record than they do in the database printout. So there are other census records besides federal census records. There are state and territorial censuses, and those years vary, and the data collected varies, but they do have the identical drawbacks, the identical things to watch out for as federal censuses do, with the handwriting and the enumerators and things of that nature. So here on the next slide, I have this wonderful resource for you. A colleague and I, we were researching a census, and we couldn't figure out what this abbreviation stood for. And so we discovered this wonderful, beautiful resource. Enumerators didn't have a lot of time, and they went from door to door, and they asked people if they visited one house and they got the information they needed from there. The next 3 doors down, no one could be home. They didn't get information from them. They're going to have to go back. So that means that the order of the families visited is not the same as the order of the neighborhood. And so it's not an alphabetical order. It's just an order of families visited in a particular region. And sometimes enumerators couldn't get a hold of anybody who lived in the house, and so they just asked anybody they could find, a neighbor or someone who worked at the house. Tell me about who lives here, and that's where sometimes you run into these abbreviations. I would have never thought that SBL stood for step brother-in-law. I would have figured that would have meant sibling, but you never know. So those are definitely some things to watch out for. Who gave the information, who took the information, when was the information taken. Censuses are wonderful, but there's a whole lot of different things to watch out for. So how do you find your census? Can I have a show of hands, please, for those of us who have access to Ancestry Library Edition through our public libraries? All right. Oh, good. Great. I'm so glad. Ancestry Library Edition is a wonderful, wonderful resource made to public libraries. It's great. They are actually one of the best places to access census records from. If you don't have it, I'll get to you. But with Ancestry Library Edition, you cannot create an account. You cannot build your family tree. You cannot save your records to a folder and continue your research for later. It's basically they give you access to their database, but none of the other features that you get if you would have a paid subscription. You can print out the original records from Ancestry Library Edition, and so that is always super useful. Family Search and Ancestry Library Edition kind of share a lot of their records. So if you need to access census records and you do not have an Ancestry Library Edition connection, I would definitely use Family Search because it's the same database that Family Search is pulling their census records from as Ancestry Library is pulling their census records from. And you can access that at any internet connection, but again, you do have to create that account with your email and a little bit of your information so that you'll be part of the LDS database, and then you can print out your original records from Family Search. So these are the two best and easiest ways to access census records in a nice and presentable manner that you can print out and then grab your magnifying glass and see what you can see with that old handwriting. When you are reading your census records, be aware that every census recorded different information. And census records, like I mentioned earlier, they're recorded by the order in which the families were visited. So if an enumerator is going down the street, he's just going to record families as they were visited, not in the physical order in which the houses are on the street. I mentioned check on your neighbors, and that sometimes a neighbor answered the enumerator's questions. The handwriting's usually kind of bad, but then there's the politics. And this is where the human component comes in. This year, the Census Bureau is encouraging people to enter their own information online. That way it's coming direct from the source, and there's very little interpretation or political representation given. But in previous years, especially in the years that are available to us, these were enumerators, real people taking down this information. And so you might find some politics in there. For example, an example from my family, way back in an old census, I have a family member who I am told by family lore says was a Native American, but in the census he's listed as black. And so that's where you get the politics from the enumerator showing up in the census. So definitely be aware of politics and that it was a human doing this, and humans are fallible. But this year should be different because we're all going to type in our own information online. So get your computer labs ready for that, right? So this is a census quick start. Oh, this is a picture of a census. I skipped a slide there. This is the 1900 federal census. It's the 12th of the United States. And this is from West Virginia. I don't believe this was anyone in my family. I don't believe I chose this as a personal example. But as you can see here on the left side, it's got the house number, and then there's a large column with the name, and they always put the head of household at the top. And then usually it's followed by the wife and the children. And then after the children, you'll find lodgers or boarders or servants or things of that nature. What's nice about this census is that it captures the occupation of children in West Virginia. They were at school, which is great. Stay in school, kids. But another cool thing about this 1900 census is that it captures where people were born, in what state they were born, and in what state their parents were born. So this is one of those. It's going to give you a clue to the next thing that you're going to be researching. So definitely pay attention to your censuses. And right now from this slide, I'm sure you cannot read all of the column headings there, but I'm going to give you a resource for that right now. The National Archives census records, the link here is to, like I said, the National Archives census records. And what's great about them is you can download blank federal census forms for all of the available years. And so that way you can see the columns clearly. And then if you want to, you could recreate census pages in your own handwriting to see if you can catch any links there. There's a nice little YouTube video about how to read census records. There's blank census forms you can also get from Ancestry.com. And then there is the Census Quick Start. This is an article from the Family Search Wiki. I've got the link to it right down there. And Jill Schumacher is from the Riverton Family Search Library, and she wrote this wonderful article which I have summarized for you. The main things are to search one census year at a time, to make sure that you try name variants. When I call to order pizza, I say this is going to be for Maggie Rose, and sometimes I picked it up and it's for Maggie Rhodes, and then sometimes it's for Maggie Rhodes, and then sometimes it's for Maggie Rose. So you'll see name variances in the censuses. Also, if you are searching your female relatives, know when to use a married name versus a maiden name. You're not going to find your great-grandmother under her married name before she was married. So if you are looking for her place of birth, you might want to go ahead and switch to that maiden name. You always want to look at the original record, because that's where you're going to find out those extra tidbits of information, those clues that are going to lead you on those scavenger hunts that are going to help you form your family's history. Then also you want to check the enumeration date. The enumeration dates of censuses are usually at the top in that heading page, because if you have an uncle who's born in 1900, he may or may not be in the 1900 census, because if he was born in May before the census was taken, he's going to be in the census. But if he was born in October after the census was taken, censuses are usually taken during the summer, then he's not going to show up in the census because he doesn't exist yet. So be aware of that also. All right, so accessing our census records, I talked about Family Search with the free account, free downloads, and then I talked about Ancestry Library Edition, no account, but you do have free downloads. So those are our two best options. Okay. So I mentioned earlier that gramsproject.org, some free software out there for genealogists. Let's get into the skinny of it, all right? And so with genealogy software, you can build a digital tree. At my high school graduation party, all of my great aunts came in out of town, and even my great aunts came in out of town, and they had this giant roll of that old computer paper that was all connected with the whole things on the sides because it would sit in a box underneath the old-fashioned printer and then just kind of be eaten up by the printer, and it was all perforated and you had to tear it apart. Well, heaven forbid you tear apart these perforations, because it was a huge roll of paper and they spread it across all the tables, and that was our family tree. It took a suitcase to carry it. With software, you can build your digital tree and carry it in a flash drive. You can retain your source citations. You can print familiar charts to a point instead of having one giant chart that is unwieldy and difficult to see. You can print out just the part that pertains to this section that you are researching. And then you can use Andrew says he's going to smack me because I called printing paper old-fashioned. Okay, so and then you can upload your software to other genealogical services. If you choose to subscribe to another genealogical service after you've used your free one, then you can upload it straight to them. They're mostly all transferable. Yes, Kristen Corbin says, was it like the green bar paper, one big stack? Yes, it was just what, yeah, and it was all connected and it came out accordion file and it was a lot of paper, a lot of paper. All right, and so the first software I want to talk about is the one that I mentioned earlier, grams.org. Gramsproject.org, I'm sorry about that. And this is, like I said, it's an open source software, which means it's 100% free. There's a team of tech people who are constantly updating this. They're very responsive if you give them feedback. They're willing to help you. There's plenty of tutorials out there on how to use this software, because one of the drawbacks is that there is a bit of a learning curve to it. Once you understand the mechanics of this software, it becomes very easy, but it does take an understanding of the mechanics to get there. With this software, you do have offline access. You do not have to be connected to the internet. And it is the complete package. You download this one bit of software and you don't have to do anything else. It's all included right there. And with this software, you have unlimited data. You can add as many ancestors as you have. You can upload as many files as you need. You can upload pictures. I mean, everything. You can keep it all right here in this software, organized and easily findable, and it prints lovely, gorgeous familial charts. Okay, the next software I'm going to talk about is MyHeritage. This is the free software that comes from myheritage.com, which is a subscription-based genealogical service. But you can download their software to free, and it will sync with your MyHeritage account if you subscribe to their service. It is very user-friendly, but it does have lots of those little nagging like, hey, check this out. You can see in the upper right-hand corner of the picture that I've got, a little new flag there on my DNA. If I were to click on that, it would say, subscribe, $16.99 a month for this, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no. It does have a 250 ancestor limit and a 500 megabit storage limit, but it does have lovely printable charts, and it is user-friendly. So I do recommend this despite the nagging request for payment. All right, and then so I didn't have a whole lot of time to go through all of the free genealogical software out there, but I have links to it at the end. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the FamilySearch.org. There, it's all web-based. So it's not something that you're going to download to your computer. It's all web-based. It's that free account. It will automatically link you to ancestors that it recognizes that are already in the LDS tree. And it's based upon the works of the Genealogical Society of Utah, which was founded in 1894. And it is the largest collection of genealogical and historical records in the world. They have a vault in a mountain, and they are digitizing this stuff and getting it online every single day. And they accept volunteers to help transcribe it and do databases. Leslie says Family Search has multiple errors and are hard to impossible to get corrected. Yes, Leslie, and that's probably because it's the volunteers just regular people like us who are transcribing some of these documents on behalf of FamilySearch.org. They also have a lot of their church members do work for this, and they may or may not be fully trained. However, you gotta admit that they are huge and they are a major factor in genealogical research. They are primarily funded by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints because this is their mission, this is their thing. So be aware of that. And Leslie, do you have something else to say that we can share? All right. If you do see an error on any of the records or transcriptions in FamilySearch.org, definitely let them know. Here is kind of what your dashboard is going to look like. If you go in the very upper right-hand corner there's a help. You can definitely access the people at Family Search and let them know. But their database is so massive. They have so many records. That it might take them a while to get corrected. So this is what my screen of my Family Search account looks like. You can see I've got a family tree up there. I can search. I can add memories. I don't use a lot of these features. I pretty much just use it for searching. It's a lot of fun to go through, especially if you search through or browse through their collections. Because a lot of their collections have been digitized but not indexed. So browsing through their collections is pretty fun. I actually found a record of deaths. It was a book for an institution here in Ohio that had an outbreak of typhus, and it was really sad to go through this. And it was digitized, just not indexed. Lots of really good information in there. Some of the other software that I'm going to link you to, but I haven't reviewed, is Legacy 9.0 and Roots Magic Essentials. Legacy 9.0 and Roots Magic Essentials, there are paid versions of these programs, but you can download them for free. I haven't used them all that much, but if you don't like any other options, feel free to use these, and then definitely shoot me an email and let me know how you liked it. That way I'm better informed, and so is everyone else. All right, so I am winding down here, but here are some wonderful resources. Another reason why you have got to download the PowerPoint is because this lists a lot of the resources that I have used in the past. The Family Tree magazine is here. The Researcher's Guide to American Genealogy, 4th edition. I love this book. The Family Tree Fact Book that I mentioned earlier. This source right in the middle, Handwriting of American Records for a Period of 300 Years. This book is so cool. And it is still accessible by public libraries. However, it might be kind of difficult to get a hold of. It has not been digitized. It's still under copyright. I can't wait for it to go out of copyright. So if you do get a hold of this book, while you have it in your hands, I would definitely study it, make your notes, photocopy a page or two, but stay within the reasonable limits, and definitely try to get your hands on this book. Mentioned earlier, Evidence Explained by Elizabeth Shown Mills, and then The Everything Guide to Online Genealogy. Trace your roots, share your history, create a family tree. I mean, who doesn't love an everything guide? And then there's The Source, a guidebook to American genealogy, and this is published by the good people at Ancestry. And it's probably more information than any of us will ever need, but if you choose to further your genealogical studies, this is about 5 steps, 15 steps greater than what we just talked about today in this webinar. All right, I think I did pretty good on how would you begin research in Europe? Good question, Angela. There are resources out there, lots of books, researching your European ancestors, researching your French ancestors. The first thing I would do is I would look through my library catalog to see if they had a book for those specific ancestors. Also, FamilySearch.com, they have census records from some places in Europe. I've been able to find some of my European ancestors in European census records. Jack Newcomb says, when searching for a family member, I often run into multiple instances of the name. How do you determine which one is your ancestor? Good question, Jack. So what you do if you find, several Robert Palmers, well, what you do is you try to match dates and times, like known facts. You find a Robert Palmer over here, but what's he doing in California when around this time he was supposed to be in the military? Was he in a military base in California? How do I find these records? Also check birth dates and then the people associated with your ancestor to determine which one is your true ancestor and which one is just a doppelganger. Jack, did I answer your question? Angela, did I answer your question? Okay, so if you have any tips, any tricks, or ideas to share, I've got just a few minutes left. I've got just a few minutes left. Again, definitely get these downloads. Feel free to share and share alike. If you are teaching a genealogy class to your library patrons, feel free to use all of the resources that you have received in this webinar. Photocopies are fine. My mentor, Deborah Kipko from the Wayne County Public Library System. I told her what I was doing with these, and she said, yes, sure, please go on, go forth. Do you use Find a Grave? Kimberly Drexel, that is an excellent question. Find a Grave is a database of where people are buried, and it's kind of crowdsourced. And so I would only use Find a Grave as additional supporting documentation. I would hesitate to use it as my here's 100% proof that this is my ancestor. I would definitely look up internment records to corroborate that, and or death records. A lot of times they mention in which cemetery your ancestor is. And then also because it's crowdsourced, it's people going out there and taking pictures of the headstones and uploading them. It's people going out there logging into Find a Grave and writing those little biographies. It's not 100% verified, but it is extremely useful as supporting documentation. So yes, Kimberly Drexel, have I answered your question? Okay, Leslie says, do you think Find a Grave similar to family trees that are posted to Ancestry and Family Search? When it comes to using someone else's research, I would always check the sources. And that's why I mentioned earlier, cite your sources. If someone asserts a fact without any supporting documentation, you always want to be skeptical of that in any field, in any case. So when people upload their family trees, their ancestors' information to these databases, and I'm looking at them, I'm always skeptical. I'm always like, okay, they say that this person is this. Where's the proof? Let me see a vital record. Let me see a census record. Let me see something that proves their assertion before I'm going to believe it 100%. Because we've all got those family histories in our background. Oh, your great-grandfather picked up your great-grandmother on the Trail of Tears and rescued her, and they built a sod house in Tennessee, and here's a picture of your grandpa, and, that we got to prove it. Family stories can be true to a point, but we always need that 100% proof of evidence. Does that answer your question, Leslie? Well, I think I did pretty good on time here. Okay. Darlene says, Thank you, Maggie. You joined midway through. Darlene, yep, Darlene, go ahead. Yep, download everything. Listen to the recording. You'll be great. Brian says, great info. Thanks for the book recommendation. Yes, no problem, Brian. Anything I can help. Angela says, thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for sharing this hour with me. I love talking about my passions. I can tell that you guys are passionate and interested as well. I love the interactions we had. And I hope you're all inspired to go out and find some family records.
Great. Thanks, Maggie. Great presentation. It's nice to see you can still do something for free.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions? Any more questions? You guys have been great. Very nice interactivity today. All right, I don't see any other questions come through, so I just want once again to thank Maggie for putting this together for us and all those wonderful handouts. Very, very good job. And thank you all for attending. We'll see you again soon at another PCI webinar. Have a great afternoon, everybody.